My name is Bob Piccolo. You're asking about interest in Rodney Street, and I have lived in Helena since 1973, and I've always been kind of taken by it. It's just kind of a unique part of town. But started to get some real connection with it. Never lived in the area, but I started to get more connected. I got a job at Carroll College in 1976. It was a new job to develop field placements for social work students. So one of the places I went right away was the local, or the state probation and parole office, the local office of that. At that time, I think probation was maybe a little bit different than it is now. There were far fewer people on their caseloads, for one thing. And there was, as I talked to people there, I gathered that there was kind of a focus on maybe more of a social work approach to helping probationers or parolees in terms of things like living arrangements and help with jobs and just help with general adjustment. It may not be quite the same way now just because their caseloads got so overwhelming, I think, over the years. But at the time it seemed like something that I could be interested in for what my job was. I went up there and found the people to be extremely friendly. I mean, all of the officers, male and female, were just really nice people. And I did have some students who were interested in the work. So I started with, I think I always had like maybe at least 2 students up there every semester. So I was up there quite a bit and got to know people. So when you were asking about interesting anecdotes about Rodney Street, I thought about Monte Carrillo, who was one of the probation officers at the time. And I don't know where he's at now, actually. He may wind up seeing if he still lives in Helena, but I haven't seen him in a long time at this point. But he had a pretty good sense of humor, and I mean, we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things he told me that stuck with me was one of the things he liked to do when he was kind of bored or just wanted to have a little bit of an outlet for a while was to go over to the Jester's Bar. And at that time, and still is true, I mean, anybody on probation or parole is not allowed to drink alcohol, but of course they will anyway. I mean, at least some people will. So Monty would go over to Jester's, not thinking that he was actually going to violate anybody or put somebody in jail, but just kind of for the entertainment. It would be pretty packed with people. He said he could go in there and just empty the place out. It was like you could hear just a stampede of feet running for the back door when he came in the front door. And it was just amusing to him. And I thought it was pretty funny too, actually, although the owner of Jester's might not have liked losing the business that he did at, when Monty would do that. So that was one of the things that I remembered in particular. 1985, I was still working at Carroll, but I also got a job at, was Mental Health Services Incorporated at the time. And one of the things I had to do, like everybody that worked there, was to be on call for the crisis line. It was like a local number at the time, and we ran around with beepers, and we had like a certain amount of time to call back in and see what was going on. One of the things that came up regularly with that was calls from the jail. At that time, the jail was still in where the Myrna Loy building is now. For a lot of people, I mean, that's like ancient history at this point, because the new jail is kind of like the old jail now again, that they've remodeled it and that sort of thing. But it was kind of interesting to go up there. It was very different than anything you would picture now. I mean, it's been a long time, so maybe my layout or my memory of how the layout of the place was is a little bit off. But I do remember that when you came in the door, which was, I think, the same place where the main door to the Myrna is right now, off to the left there was a really big holding cell. I mean, like, 50 feet across type of a cell. Absolutely no privacy. But that's where they would put somebody. So they would call the mental health services when they thought somebody had a mental illness. So if whoever was on call would have to go up and do some kind of an assessment, normally about 2 in the morning or something like that. But it was very open. It was kind of a reasonably good experience, and you know, notwithstanding the lack of privacy, it was kind of relaxing, and at least whoever they had locked up was pretty reasonably comfortable there, I think. I mean, in fact, I think maybe as I look back on it, that the people I saw there normally were not hyper agitated or anything like that. So it was only about a year later that they opened the new jail, and that turned out, I mean, that's right across the street, of course, or, you know, like, I guess a block away across the street. But that was kind of a shock to me, because I was expecting it to be an improvement, because the only thing that I didn't like about the old jail was the lack of privacy. But the new jail turned out to be, struck me as being far worse. I mean, there was this little tiny cubicle in there. It was cold. I remember that, you know, usually whoever was in there had to have a blanket. It was actually just really difficult, and people tended to be far more agitated. So my first thought around that was that the old jail was like way better than the new jail, at least as far as what you might call being more humane, I guess. It was also much smaller, I'm sure. I mean, Helena has grown, and far more people are incarcerated all the time, and that sort of thing. Those are a couple things that stick out mostly in my memory. I'm pretty sure if anybody is really talking much about Rodney Street, Mickey Nelson, the coroner, would have to come up in a lot of stories probably, and maybe you've already had that. He was, for many, many years, he was the coroner, and his office was in the same building as where the probation and parole office is still. And he was just a really nice guy. I had a lot of dealings with him, sort of indirectly always, because I would have a client that also would be maybe working with him. There was one man that I saw for years and years that's deceased now, but he was kind of on, just somebody that Mickey liked to help. This client of mine was a heavy smoker, which of course, you know, a lot of people are. It wasn't good for his health. But he didn't have much money, and so Mickey used to save cigarettes for him. I suppose he picked them up. You know, Mickey had to go out to the various houses where people died and check out just to see if there was anything unusual about it, mostly, I suppose. But anytime anybody died at home, he had to go there. So I'm kind of, he never told me, but I'm kind of thinking he probably just picked up things like cigarettes that were just lying around. And he would actually call this client of mine. He'd come up there and give him some cigarettes. So just before Mickey died, my client also died, and he had no family at all, no relatives of any kind really, or nobody really close to him at all. So he wound up giving me the power of attorney to take care of his property, which wasn't much. So Mickey at that time was arranging for cremations, so I took care of that for my client. My client had an old van, which I think Mickey or somebody from the county came and took that, but I had to go through the property of this person in his small apartment. He had a really nice pistol, and I didn't know what to do with it for sure. I thought this is actually worth probably $400 or $500 at least, so I thought that I should take it up to Mickey and he could sell it, or I could buy it back from him if I wanted it, or whatever we decided to do, but it would partially defer the cost of the cremation, which I don't know what it is, but I think he told me it was $1,300 or something like that. So I took the pistol up, which it seemed kind of odd walking into basically the probation and parole office with a pistol, but I dropped it off, and unfortunately that was right when Mickey himself passed away. So then nobody in the office knew what to do with the pistol. I went up there to talk about it, and they had no idea what to do. I don't know what happened to it. I finally saw some article in the paper that said that how odd it was that they had all this, Mickey had all this weird stuff in his office, including a pistol. I thought, well, I know about that one, but I never pursued it any further. So I don't know, I guess those are things that just kind of stand out. I think Rodney Street is just, I always kind of enjoyed going up around there. I mean, I knew other people, had other clients that lived in the area. Of course, it was, and maybe still is, a place where a person can find an apartment for slightly less rent. Maybe, I don't know how that's going these days with the way rent prices are going, but I knew lots of people in the area. And I think it's just a unique part of Helena. I wouldn't want it to lose its character, as you say, maybe beautify. Every time I drive down Rodney Street, though, I think they ought to fix it right away. I mean, get that street, repaved and get the bumps out of it a little bit, that sort of thing. So that would be, I think that would help the whole neighborhood a lot, just to improve that. But as I say, I mean, you don't really, at least I wouldn't want to see it become, say, gentrified or something, like there happens in cities where they start tearing down the old buildings and putting in new, more expensive buildings, driving out the current residents, that sort of thing. I mean, I wouldn't want to see that. Beautifying, I don't know what that would be. I mean, maybe other improvements, more trees along the sidewalks. I don't know what would be attractive to bring more businesses in. It'd be wonderful to have a full-service grocery store there. I mean, I'm not saying that what's there now isn't handy, but having like something more convenient. I think a lot of the people that, or at least some of the people that live in the area, don't have cars, and it can be quite an obstacle to get down to the grocery store. So that would help. I don't know how you attract that in for sure. The Myrna there is like a great asset for the area. I mean, that's just a wonderful facility, the way that's been developed. So it's important that that somehow keeps going too. I mean, I've worried about that with COVID, that places like that haven't been able to perform or operate normally for over a year already now. So I'm hoping that, as far as I know so far, they're maybe getting enough in the way of different funding to keep going. But that's an asset for the whole community, of course, and brings a lot into Rodney Street, or into the area there. Jester's Bar is still there, and actually, it's a great place. I know that at least some of the events at the Myrna will include a ticket for a free drink at Jester's, so they kind of work together that way, I think, too, to get more business in there. Otherwise, I don't know. I mean, I really don't want to see the area change in a huge way. Just, as you say, maybe be beautified and spruced up and encourage more economic development, especially a grocery store or that sort of thing. I think, it's a part of Helena that I think is pretty unique, so I would encourage people just to go down there and check it out. But one reason to go there always is just to get to the Myrna, so I would put in a real plug for that. I mean, hopefully they're going to be back to operating more normally soon, but they're already showing movies and probably are getting fairly active on that. So they have a lot of live events, they have art exhibits, all sorts of things. And Jester's Bar is still an institution there. I mean, it's, I'm not saying that people should go out drinking necessarily, but if you're going to have a drink, it's kind of fun just to check that out. I mean, it's been there forever, I think, as far as I know. And maybe even just on a nice day, stroll around the area, check out the courthouse, the Myrna, walk up and down the street a little bit. I mean, there may be a lot of parolees living in the area, but I think it's very safe. I mean, I never worry at all about any problems just from being in the area. I think, I never had any concerns about that. It's kind of, on a nice evening, it's kind of worth just walking around out there.